Very happy to have back on our bench racing hotline from Fox Sports Speed Channel, and of course the author of Real Men Work in the Pits, Jeff Hammond. Welcome back to the show, Jeff. Haven't talked to you in a while.
Yeah, it's been a little while, but it's always a pleasure to be on your show, and just glad to be here this afternoon.
Did you get all your hay in? I know you were out working the field there last couple of days.
Well, we're getting everything prepped. I did all the mowing on Monday, and we go back and fluff it, as they call it, tether it, and got that done. And now we're going to go back and do it one more day on Wednesday, and we'll start baling on Thursday. It takes about 3 days for it to dry good enough so you can put it up.
So you've got like a real life, don't you?
Well, we try. We try to keep up with our neighbors, you might say.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's the tough part, as much as you're off and out doing stuff. Charlie and I talked in the first segment that we felt a little disappointed by the race this week at Darlington. We didn't think that it kind of lived up to our expectations of Darlington. Did Darlington get tamed by this new car, do you think?
I think it definitely helped. I think that with the right side tire that Goodyear showed up with, it had grip to it. It laid down a good patch of rubber for the guys to get to be able to race on. And the new car, we keep talking about what it was designed for. It was intended to be a strong suit on mile-and-a-half type racetracks, and understanding that Darlington is a 1.366 mile racetrack, but close enough in my book to count for what it's designed for. And you need side force. You need good grip all the way around the racetrack. I think the cambered rear end housing, the side force that this car does generate was pretty incredible. New track record. But for whatever reason, the guys were able to, lean on one another and not really have a factor, have a big problem with the wall and race pretty aggressively and race fast all night long. But I know what you're saying. I mean, you kept thinking, you kept waiting on a lady in black to jump up and really, kind of like teach a couple of them lessons, but it didn't happen.
You talk about side force, and you're the best guy to ask this question I can think of. When was the first time side force became important, or has it always been there and just nobody ever talked about it?
I can honestly give you when I learned about it first and forehand was 1985. Working with the engineers at Chevrolet, we built our All-Star car. I think it's kind of funny and ironic that we're talking about the All-Star event coming up this weekend, but we actually extended the right side quarter panel on an 85 Monte Carlo about 2.5 to 3 inches, trying to close off underneath the right side of the car and to create some more right side downforce. And it was very, very helpful. We won that race, and that car was built for that specific reason. And when we put it into the wind tunnel, they always skew the car, a little bit to the left to see what the car, how it looks in a turn, slight turn to a slight yaw moment. And that car definitely had decent drag numbers, but it had extremely good side force numbers.
Did NASCAR have any problem with that car going through inspection?
No, because at that time we still fit all the templates.
Okay.
Just the right side was longer than normal, and they really weren't. The door seam was where it was supposed to be. This rocker panel was a little bit, longer than what it should be, which is very reminiscent of the side skirt we run today. But we run the side skirt, for two reasons: one for safety, and the other one for to help, generate downforce in the cars.
Well, in 1985, that whole skirt and undercarriage aerodynamic thing was just really, really getting to be a big factor. Came over, I think, probably from Formula One and from IndyCar originally, right, Jeff?
Well, I think that's that's where the engineers were kind of like looking at it from, and again, we from myself, you just don't understand how important sometimes engineers are until they start pointing things out like that and tell you and show you how you create it. But it's very important, and every time that you can add, I'm going to say 10 pounds to the side of a car as far as that side force is concerned, you have just improved the overall handling capabilities of that race car. You've also improved the cornering capabilities of that race car, which it really means that when you get down in there, you can carry more corner entry speed. The car will stay more stable, through the center of the corner, and then on exit, you can really get back after the gas, and it just keeps the rear underneath the car, so it allows you to accelerate off the corners too. So the side force is a big friend when you have it working for you, and it is when you don't have it, it's one of those things that a driver will scream to the top of his lungs because he can't drive his race car.
We're talking with Jeff Hammond from Fox Sports and Speed Channel. Wasn't like 1985? Wasn't that the year Bill Elliott drove like a 9/10 scale Thunderbird too? Wasn't that right around that same time?
We used to call it the football because it was so aerodynamically shaped like a football. It was not even funny. The Thunderbird he was racing at that time, which was the design that NASCAR, Ford came up with, and NASCAR approved as their car of choice that year while we had the Monte Carlo. And unfortunately for us, our cars were no match for what that car brought to the racetrack each and every week. But in the long run, we were able to still wear him down, and we won the championship that year. But he clearly had the dominant car in 1985, even though he didn't win the championship.
I don't know. We've had this conversation many times, and the new car, the Gen 6 car, has made the cars on track look more like the ones in the showroom. But do you think, did you like it better back in the mid '80s when there was a significant difference in aerodynamics? Because you just explained to it that Bill Elliott didn't win the championship, even though he had that advantage.
Trust me, if you're on the good side of having a good car, yeah, you love it. But if you're on the bad side of it, you hate it. Yeah. And NASCAR's response back then was, hey, your manufacturer submitted this body style. We approved it. You don't like it, change manufacturers. I mean, they weren't going to get into fixing a whole lot of problems to make cars, equal like they have today. Now, with that being said, they did let GM, because of the slope-back design of the Ford at that time, put what we call the Aero Coupe, which was an extension of the back glass, to make it more like a slope-back or a fastback type design, so that it wouldn't be so out of kilter. But back in those days, for Chevrolet or Pontiac to be able to do that, they had to build, I think it was something like 250, maybe even 500 cars with that particular design before they would consider that a manufacturer make. Not just a special edition or limited edition. You couldn't build just 10 of them and all of a sudden say, well, we got an Aero Coupe and now we're going to start putting back glasses on all those race cars. They had, certain regulations that had been set forth, way back in the very beginning of NASCAR. That's how they set the rule book each and every year, was that manufacturers would make submissions of this is what we're going to be our cars of choice for the next 3 years, and NASCAR would approve it. And if there was something else that had to be done to it, it had to still be a production car.
We're kind of talking in the Wayback Machine here, and
I can remember going in and looking in the parts book at the Chevy dealership that I was connected with at the time. You could actually order those parts. You could kind of buy that car if you wanted to. They were real expensive, but they were in the general parts catalog for a Chevy or Ford or whatever.
See, to your point, that's one of the things that these parts had to be able to come across the counter.
Yep.
For the biggest part. That was kind of like part of the requirement. That you could get a back glass out of, and it had to be glass at that time in the stock car. But then we made them out of Lexan in the race cars.
Right. How much of that car then was a part that you could buy that was, I guess, quote, stock, and how much did you fabricate at that point in the 80s and early 90s?
We still bought a lot of the car. The car was big enough still, and the front fenders and everything. We had to use the majority of it. We would English wheel the shape that we needed for the front fenders, as well as the rear quarter panels out of sheet metal. But the basic quarter panel and the basic fender structure had to be there. At one time, they were even to the point to where when you opened up the hood, they had to be able to see like where the part number would be located or stamped in the in that particular part, to be legal. So same thing with the the noses, the hoods. I mean, all that stuff. It was all, as he's already was talking about. You can go down to the local dealership and you can buy those parts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow. One last thing before we let you go here. Were you surprised at all that the penalties to Joe Gibbs Racing and Penske were lessened the amount that they were?
For the Penske deal, I was a little bit shocked. But somewhere along the line, John Middlebrook saw something and heard something that the previous appellate judges didn't, and definitely did not totally agree with Mike Helton and John Darby and Robin Pemberton about the severity of the penalties. The one with Joe Gibbs, I can understand that one a little easier because of the circumstances. But even with that being said, I was somewhat amazed that the first appeal court, first appellate three judges, that they are the ones who made the significant reduction, and it didn't have to go to John Middlebrook to be amended or, basically done away with. But all in all, the rules that were broken were still broken. The penalties were still not maybe as severe, but still were pretty attention getters. I mean, $200,000 for this and $100,000 for that, and still guys had to sit home for a while. That's something I would never have liked if I'd have been a crew chief. I mean, I enjoyed it one time because it was a game, and nobody ever took it personal. You'd pay a $50 or $100. I think the most I ever paid was $5,000 for a part that wasn't approved. But in the long run, nobody talked about taking points away from you, and nobody talked about making you stay home to disrupt the flow of the team. So, today's standards and today's rules are really set toward this new generation of NASCAR as far as the rule book is not gray anymore, as we like to say. It's black and white. So when you break a rule, you can expect to get hit with a pretty good fine or suspension or loss of points. I mean, that's just what that rule book is designed to do. It's not to warn you. It's not to, dissuade you or help you, not to make your choices a little bit smarter. It's there. If you mess up, you're going to pay a price.
We're talking with Jeff Hammond. Here's my last question. I guarantee it. You say you got fined. Most you think you remember was $5,000. Is that something that the crew chief ends up coming out of their own pocket, or does the car owner step up and say, "Hey, you were trying to do what's best for the team. I'll take care of it"?
For the most part, the teams that I worked for covered the penalties for that exact reason. Everybody was kind of like on the same, boat that were doing something that was not something that I thought up. It was kind of like it was a team effort.
Yeah.
To help the team, and so I never had a owner not pay it. I did have an owner tell me there wouldn't be any more, and so that much I understood, and I got the message loud and clear, and I didn't. So the sport's changing a lot. It was changing a lot whenever I retired, and it has continued to change. And unlike a lot of the crew chiefs, I mean, I understand. You need to find out where the edge is, and you need to put your car as close as the edge as possible. But trust me, I would not want to be one that stepped over the line, and not even by an accident.
Yeah.
When something happens like with a failed shock, like what happened to Martin Truex Jr.'s car and the points and the penalties that went with there, that I can understand. You do have part failures, and by today's rules, it was not intended. It was not designed that way. But when it happens, the crew chief and the owner and the driver, they all have to be willing to take the penalty in stride, you might say. That's just the way it is, because we all know that there may be some part failures, but when you create a part that is definitely outside the limits of the rule book, then to me that brings in intent and, a total disregard of really what maybe the rule should be. I mean, it's in there. You don't mess with this race car. You don't mess with these parts. If you think you want to mess with these parts, you got to raise your hand like you're in school and ask the teacher for permission to do something. And that's what NASCAR's new way of doing business is, and you got to respect it.
All right. Jeff, as always, we truly appreciate you spending time with us. It's always fun to talk to you. We'll do it again, and hopefully it won't be as long this next time, and we'll get you back on here because it's always fun to talk not only current stuff but from the Wayback Machine as well.
Anytime, guys. Anytime. I got my DeLorean all fueled up. Ready.
All right.
All right.
Perfect.
Good deal. Thanks, Jeff. We'll talk to you again, man.
All righty.
Thanks,
Take care.
Jeff. Jeff Hammond, one of our